Remember how old maps used to say, "There be no monsters here," when pointing to the sea? For me, riding burning horses was like wading into an ocean of memory, monsters and all. My mother, the repository of our family lore, died in 1992. She left no heirlooms, only stories of her life, which spanned the 20th century and was lived amid agonizing change. At first, I attempted to write Mama's story as a narrator, but I kept hearing her voice and her expressions, almost as if she were trying to tell me what to say. I finally decided to let Eva tell her own story in the first person. So please keep in mind that what I'm about to read, although written in the first person, it is Eva, my mother, speaking, not me. This is from the first chapter. Across the landscape of my dreams, horses gallop and gallop about, and I am running, filled with joy, trying to catch one. Just as I reach for the mane of the black stallion to swing myself up onto his glistening back, the horse is enveloped in flames. The flames leap and dance with fury, and I shield my face from the intense heat, staggering backwards to escape the fire. From the crackling inferno, the stallion gallops toward me, his mane blazing. I wake, drenched with perspiration, and shake my head to escape the familiar nightmare. The dream arouses so many memories that I know sleep will not come again. In her small San Francisco apartment, Eva gets up and sits at her ancient Royal Portable and begins to type. She sees herself playing the piano at her 16th birthday party, frustrated that she can't dance with her guests. But then, in her words, suddenly we were interrupted by the sound of violins, music coming from the garden below. We hurried out to the veranda and looked over the stone wall. My father had hired a gypsy band. I ran to slam the piano shut. For the rest of the evening, I took turns dancing with all the boys. A couple of years later, at a similar party, she meets Yoshka, who in time became my father. After that, Yoshka was all there was ever for my mother, as he became the center of her universe. She ends the description of their wedding thus: the organ nearly inaudible, the scent of jasmine and incense, the light through the beautiful stained glass windows, and till death do us part. The heart of the story takes place in war-torn Budapest. Eva's privileged life, filled with love, music, and the laughter of her two young daughters, is turned upside down and forever altered by the arrival of the Nazis and the siege of Budapest during World War II. Eva, as yet exempt from internment due to being married to a Catholic, tries to help her cousin Peter, who escaped from a Nazi labor camp and showed up at our apartment. He asked my mother to retrieve some money he had stashed with a friend so he could try to bribe his way out of Hungary. Eva successfully obtains the funds and is returning to our apartment, where my sister and I and her cousin are waiting. Again, in Eva's own words. As I was about to cross the square to our apartment, a staff car bearing SS insignia screeched to a halt, blocking my path. Oberleutnant Weiss, whom I immediately recognized from newspaper pictures as being the German officer in charge of hunting down escaping Jews, bolted from the car and blocked my path. The lieutenant had a reputation for playing cat and mouse with Jews. He was known to enjoy terrorizing people. Gnädige Frau, honored lady, he said, using the respectful German form of address in derision. He raised his right hand to his temple in a mocking gesture of salute. I'm given to understand that you're carrying some funds for your cousin Peter. Weiss glared at me, glancing at the envelope with the money I clutched in my hand as he said this. My heart sank as I tried to keep all expression from my face. How could he know this? Had someone followed Peter to our apartment? What would happen to me? What would happen to the children? Why had I done this? I glanced involuntarily at our apartment windows. There must be some mistake, Herr Oberleutnant, I answered, trying to appear calm. Peter's at the Chain Bridge house, and you know no one is allowed in there. A sharp bark emanated from inside the lieutenant's car, diverting my attention. A Doberman's head and paws appeared in the rear door window. "Don't trifle with me. You know as well as I do that Peter is at your apartment with the children," the lieutenant responded, ignoring the dog. I hoped my winter coat would keep him from seeing that I was shaking. Did he really know, or was he bluffing? I became aware of Jews standing in line waiting to enter the legation behind me, were staring at me. "Help me," I thought, inwardly screaming. "Somebody help me." The dog barked again, and the lieutenant reached over and opened the car door. The Doberman leapt from the staff car to the sidewalk and crouched near the curb to defecate a few feet in front of me. The lieutenant observed this with nonchalance, and before I could think of what to say next, he extended his mirror-polished black boot and stepped into the excrement. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out what he was doing. He turned to me with hatred in his eyes. "I will make you a bargain, gnädige Frau," he said, extending his boot in my direction. "You lick the sole of my blue peen and you will see your children again." You'll need to read the book to learn what my mother decided to do. Months later, in early 1945, the German cavalry commandeered a ground-floor apartment in the building in which our family lived and used it to stable a dozen horses. An incendiary bomb set the building on fire, trapping the horses inside, which is where the title of the book comes from. We escaped from the basement shelter by going through the house next door, and my mother describes looking back from the street at the burning building. I saw flames reaching out with blue and orange claws from our bedroom windows. They leapt skyward in a macabre dance. I could hear the thumping of hoofs against the floor and the horses neighing in desperation. Then a sound, the like of which I have never heard before or since, coming from one of the dying horses. Most of our family survived the war and the Russian occupation, but conditions remained abominable, and with rampant inflation, and our farm was about to be confiscated. So my mother decided to send my sister and me out of Hungary with her own plans in place to cross the Iron Curtain illegally later to follow us to the west. To end, I want to read you a scene that takes place at the Budapest airport. My mother has sewn 10 gold Krugerrands into a teddy bear that I was carrying with me to Switzerland. Again, please remember this is Eva, my mother, speaking in the first person. I'm referred to as Agi in the story. At the airport, we hugged and kissed, but Agi seemed preoccupied as we approached customs. I was directed by an official to stay in a cordoned area while Agi approached the table where an agent was seated. She held the little golden bear under one arm and carried her small gray cardboard suitcase in her other hand. The man said something to her, and Agi tried to swing her suitcase up onto the table with one hand while hanging onto her bear with the other, without much success. The inspector stepped around the table and lifted the bag for her. He opened it, and while his hand felt around the sides of the suitcase, his eyes peered over the top and regarded Agi. She looked unconcerned, but the agent's eyes narrowed as his glance fell on the gold-laden bear. Without a word, his hand reached over to the table and pointed at the bear. Should I step forward? What have I done involving a child in such an errand? What will they do to her if they find the gold? Oh God, what could I do to divert attention? But I stood silently, gripping the rope separating me from my daughter. Agi handed over the bear with what appeared to me to be utter panache. The agent held the little bear in his big rough hands as though weighing it. "What's inside, little lady?" he inquired. "Cotton or straw, I guess," Agi squeaked in response. Her voice wasn't her own. I hoped the agent wouldn't know the difference. "Feels heavy," the inspector said. I shuddered. I couldn't think what to do to help. "Why don't you cut it open if you don't believe me?" I heard Agi say with all the authority in her voice that she could muster. The expression on her face mirrored her father, Yoshka, in speaking to one of the workers on the farm. I realized that my 10-year-old daughter was trying to bluff her way through the situation by acting indignant. I held my breath while the hardened agent glared at her. Their eyes locked, but Aggie didn't blink. "All right," he said, after what seemed like an eternity. He handed back the bear and shut the suitcase. "You can go." Aggie took the suitcase, turned her head and winked at me with Yoshka's unmistakable insolence, then walked toward the departure gate. "This child will be all right, whatever happens," I thought, and was comforted. I'm going to end with a quote from Megan O'Rourke, her book, A Long Goodbye, which captures why I wrote this book. And here's what she says. "And so we burn through the days, passing from one person to the next, the lit match of memory. I hope I've lit that match for you and that you will want to read the rest of the story." And I do want to show you the bear. I'll keep it at the table back there so you can inspect him more closely, because he's got stitches up the back. And, you know, he's a little ragged, but he's still in good shape.